Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we are talking about The Taste of Cherry. But before that, we are talking about The Bad Batch Season 2 and Ted Lasso Season 3. Full disclosure here. My microphone's not working. I'm recording with a different microphone today. I'm sorry if that sounds a little weird. All right. Anyway, here we go.
Welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is a man who's driving around asking strangers for a microphone. Mike, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Obviously no one came through, so here I am with this microphone.
Yeah.
But hopefully, hopefully it still works out.
Yeah. Well, good. Also with me is a man who is cherry glad he just watched The Taste of Cherry. How are you doing today, Justin?
I'm cherry good. Thank you for cherry asking. I don't know. I don't understand how this. I don't know. Is cherry good a saying?
No, cherry good would it? Well, you're cherry glad. It's
cherry glad
instead of very. You say cherry. You know.
Okay, so I was with it for at least half of my response.
Yeah, oh. You got it.
Right.
Well done. Well done.
If this is your first time listening, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which we like to do every other episode sometimes, where we review a film from the Criterion collection that is voted on by the listeners via our Twitter page. Before we get into the main review, we will do our usual news on the march, where we talk about what we've been watching. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can still listen. Then we will move into our Casually Criterion review. For this week, it is Taste of Cherry, spine number 45.
That's right. And as Mike said, you can vote in the poll to choose our Criterion films on our Twitter. That is at Casual Cinecast. So go there, follow us so you can vote and help curate the content we create here. If you want to send us any messages, questions about the movies, you can send a DM to that account or to email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your support over there. And as always, if you haven't done so already, like the show, give us a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever, thumbs up everywhere.
You know, it'd make us very cherry happy if you did.
Yeah. Also, if you like the show, we're all going to kill ourselves, and if you would bury us after, that'd be great.
Oh boy. Yeah, well, okay. Wow. We don't have any money to give you those. Just you have to do it for free.
I have no money, and if you could
bury
actually pay $20 a month to keep up the podcast feed for eternity for us, that'd be great.
And I think with that, we should move into news on the march. What do we say?
Yeah.
I'm ready. I just want to clarify, that's not necessarily a suicide joke. It's about the movie for anyone who hasn't seen the movie and wonders where that weird joke came from.
Full disclosure, all context. Yeah.
Yeah. But now, news on the march.
Okay.
News on the march!
All right, Justin. So, I think it's understood that you've been the Ted Lasso guy on this podcast. Not my words. Yeah. I just heard that somewhere.
Yeah, somebody said that.
Yeah.
Some weirdo.
So why don't you get us started with our Ted Lasso Season 3 discussion? What have been... I can't talk. What have been your thoughts so far?
So far, up to this point, I've really enjoyed all of Ted Lasso. I don't think it's an original take to say that it's just a sort of like, for the most part, pretty sweet, happy show that it's just like good vibes. You know, I've always compared it to Jimmy Stewart and Harvey, that movie.
Yeah.
And much like Harvey, when this show does get serious, it is actually moving because I think you do get pretty attached to most of the characters. So it works for me. And despite, like, I can kind of recognize some of the criticisms of the show being like overly saccharine, right? A little too corny and cheesy, and everyone's a little too sweet. I kind of understand that. But I've enjoyed it to this point. I think I the very first episode of the season, I felt the over-saccharine, like, too sweet. Everybody's a bit too, like, quirky and nice, and I don't know. And maybe that's just like, okay, we're doing season 3. Let's make sure everyone knows who these characters are, like anybody who's tuning in for the first time, and like, let's like rehash everybody's vibes.
What we're all about.
Yeah. But as it's been going, each episode, I've started to like the season more and more. I was honestly a little bit worried after the first episode where, like, well, maybe they weren't able to, you know, capture the lightning in the bottle for this one. Or maybe they're trying a little too hard, you know. Kind of, I got vibes of like whatever the weird episode of, or weird season of Community is, where they got new writers and fired all the head writers from the previous seasons.
Season 4, yeah,
season 4, where it's like it feels like a show trying to be Community versus just being Community, which is it's weird.
Yeah, all the actors are the same, but something's a little off.
Yeah, but anyways, as this is going, I've been getting more and more into it. I've enjoyed some of the new characters for sure. Some characters have come in and out already, and I hope we're not done with them because I was really enjoying them. To full disclosure, at the time we're recording this, I haven't seen the latest episode, which I think is episode 5. But I've seen the first 4. I think is what I'm talking about here. But so far, it's not anything new, super new or super crazy. I'm just enjoying spending more time with these characters. Is basically where I'm at. I'll toss it to you, Chris. What are you thinking?
I'm not that far off from you. I actually just recently rewatched the first season. I'm showing it to somebody else right now. And I actually think that format of things being a little too saccharine starts with like the first season. You know, the first few episodes of the first season are a little bit like, whoa, this is too much. And then it starts to get a little bit, there's like that undertone of darkness, and like maybe he's happy-go-lucky is covering, you know, some other trauma up, you know, and that's why he's so like, it's a front, that happiness. So I am hoping that we do get a little bit more. I do think there'll be more of a confrontation towards the end. And I think while it will be saccharine, there might be an undertone, you know, like a little bit of a sour undercurrent, or like a, you know, a different taste going on. Yes. Anyways, but I'm really enjoying it. I like spending time with these people. But I really think it's important that we have that sadness there too. That really is important. If we don't get enough of that, then I think it's too much. But so far, I think we've gotten just, you know, the right amount. Maybe we could use a little bit more of the sadness aspect. But yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. Mike, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's well said. I agree with you about the first 2 episodes of this season. In fact, until I watched episodes 3 and 4, I was almost kind of worried that I wasn't going to like any of this season. I thought the first episode of this season came on like way too strong for what I remember the show being. It's always been corny, like Chris said. But I think the first episode of this season felt like a lot. Maybe like even more so than the first 2 seasons. I can't quite remember. But I agree with you that once episodes 3 and 4 hit, when there starts to be a little bit more character drama and a little bit of that underlying sadness, I think the show shines at its best because there's a balance going on, right? But like Chris said, like without that balance, the show feels really uneven and stilted. And while that may work for everyone, and it doesn't necessarily not work for me, like I'm still going to finish the season, I'm not chomping at the bit for the next episode. If that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think as of recording, the latest episode has been out for 2 or 3 days now.
I think it just came out yesterday. I think it comes out on Tuesdays.
Oh, I thought it came out on Sundays. Never mind. Oh, I was going to say none of us have bothered yet, but if it's only been a day, that's understandable. I won't hold us to that high of a standard.
I forgot that it came on yesterday. I went to bed early. Otherwise, I would have watched it. But yes, it's hard to keep track of when these shows come out, right? Like the only ones I really keep track of are like HBO shows that come out on Sunday night. And you're like, I know what day this comes out on, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's easy.
Yeah.
Which sucks for me because like I'm not watching Succession, which is in its final season right now,
Yeah.
and so I have nothing going on Sunday nights.
Barry just came out. We'll talk about that
That's
later.
true. That's true. But I watched actually the first 2 episodes of season 4, like last night.
Oh, you didn't watch it?
Sweet.
I didn't watch it the night of. Actually, I tuned in to HBO like on HBO Max like at 8, but Succession was on, and I didn't realize that Barry came on at 9. So I ended up watching something else and then watching Barry the next night. But that was more of the same, which is to say good.
Yeah. Yeah, and not to take us off of Barry too much, but
yeah, right.
Because I think we're going to talk about that next week, right? Once we've all
That's
caught up on what's out so far. But back to Ted Lasso, I think the one thing I will say is like from a person who is a soccer fan and who watches the league that
the show
that
with
Richmond are in.
The sitcom where all the drinking buddies like
the Premier League
on each other all the time.
No, the league, like the soccer league that Richmond is in.
Oh,
this is like the Premier League. It's the real like top division in England.
Oh, I see.
And there are real teams, like the team that Nate coaches, West Ham, is a real team, and I will say the soccer is a lot better this season.
This season?
Yeah, like what you actually see on the way it looks on the like the field when they're playing, because they're green screening a lot of that in, so there's big crowds and stuff, and full stadiums, and it looks better. It doesn't look flawless, but I remember the first season was really scarce on like I guess soccer action, which is really fine for this show.
Sure. The last episode I think had some in it, or more than the rest. But yes, you're right.
But you can see they've got a bigger budget, which is cool for some of that. But it's really hard to detach myself from just how far off that the Premier League in the show is from the real Premier League. Fact that West Ham is not a team that would ever be in contention for a title, right? And they're like talking about how Nate is he the wonder kid? Is he going to like put him in contention? Like, so it's very, very weird to watch. And like, I have these like two realities in my head, like kind of like conflicting with each other, and it's hard to separate.
Is there like a team on there that shows up that you can't stand, and you're just like, oh, I hate that team?
Yeah, they've played my team's rivals.
Okay. What is your team?
His last season or this season? My team is Arsenal in the real Premier League, and I don't think they've encountered them in the show.
I don't think so. Manchester City and the West Ham are the two that I know off the top of my head.
Would it ruin the show for you if they encountered your favorite team and they made them out to be assholes?
I would find that funny, actually. Like, I don't know. I think that, obviously they don't have the real players out there either. So like, that's another weird thing is when I see them play like a huge team like Manchester City, and it's all like, these like kind of basically extras who aren't recognizable. Like that's sort of weird too. But so it'd kind of be the same if they play my team. But I think it'd be funny. It's kind of like when an actor plays themselves in a movie, but it's like a obscure version of themselves. Like
you're right.
Nick Cage in that Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, or like Michael Cera in that This Is the End movie, which is a movie I don't like for record, but
it was
Michael Cera is a real big asshole in that movie.
Yeah. Apparently he's playing a character based on the real life Tobey Maguire.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, like his character in that movie, like the version of himself that he's playing is supposedly a spoof of Tobey Maguire.
Oh, that's interesting.
Didn't he play? He played in Molly's Game. His character was also based on Tobey Maguire because Tobey Maguire.
Oh, maybe
was the
that's
guy...
what I'm thinking of.
Okay, I was like, he was running that poker ring.
That's what I'm thinking of. My bad. Pretend I didn't say that about the This Is the End movie.
It could be too. I mean, maybe Michael Cera should just make a career out of playing Tobey Maguire in different movies.
Maybe.
Yeah, he's just like that's his inspiration, his acting inspiration at all the time. Like,
Sure.
in some other movie, he's going to be playing Tobey Maguire in Ride with
Ride with the Devil.
Ride
No,
with the Devil.
I think,
yeah.
and this is the end. I think he's probably just playing a spoof of like himself because he's always considered to be like a really nice guy.
Yeah.
I think it's Molly's Game that I was thinking of, which I feel bad about saying earlier.
It's okay.
It's all right.
But the people forgive you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else we want to say about Ted Lasso season 3 other than it seems to be getting better based on episode 4?
This is the last season, and so I guess maybe I have high expectations too. Might be why it slumped in the beginning, because I expect a lot.
Here's one thing before we move off of Ted Lasso. Here's one thing I would like the show to do for me, and maybe the show just does not have this on its mind because it doesn't seem to have had it on its mind so far. And if you don't want to hear any spoilers for the first 2 seasons of Ted Lasso, just skip ahead to the main review if you want to. But what I would say is I would like them to actually win and do good.
Yeah.
I don't seem to remember them having done that so far. And no matter how nice Ted Lasso is and how much he changes the lives of the people that know him, I would like to think that maybe he could do his job.
Sure. There's a moment in the first season, just going back to it, where he's like, I'm not going to bench Roy Kent. And Coach Beard is like, no, is one thing when we were just coaching, kids, like college players, we wanted to make them the best people that we could. But now there are fans. There's a bunch of people that are like counting on us to win. That's the whole point of this, is to win, not just make people, better people. So
right.
I do think you have a point.
Yeah, but they seem to be leaning this season into winning ain't everything as a big theme.
Yeah, but that's always been a case for this show. So it's like, is it going to be satisfying if the show wraps up and they were never particularly good the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, it feels heavier in this, but I will say too, like season 1 ends with them getting relegated down to the league below them, and season 2 ends with them winning promotion back up to the Premier League. So they didn't like win like the biggest championship available, but they won promotion, which is something. But I understand what you mean, though. You want to feel that like his attitude, while unconventional, ultimately ends up like working because that feels good, at least to me. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like I don't really care that he made the owner a better person and he made the players like bond together. It's like, I don't know, that's worth it during the run, but it's like, I don't know. I just wonder how the show's going to feel as a whole if nothing really comes of this other than like a lot of people really like him at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. I'm sure we'll report back.
Yeah.
In a while, whenever it's all said and done.
Indeed.
It's warm and fuzzy. It's a nice blanket. I do enjoy going back there.
Yeah. On to the next thing then.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll toss it to Mike to get us started here. So Bad Batch Season 2 recently wrapped up. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so Bad Batch, I think, as we record this, wrapped up like, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, we just haven't been able to find a time to record since then. I would say that this season started off pretty slow. I was wondering if I was still going to be as interested as I was during season 1 for the first half, with the exception of a couple episodes here and there. And then I would say the last half of season 2 really kicked it into gear and got really dark in the appropriate places, and it got really serious in the appropriate places, and made you really care about the characters and what was happening. And then, like, as soon as it wrapped, I think they announced that season 3 would be the final season. And given where season 2 wraps up, I think that feels pretty good. This feels like the Empire Strikes Back to the first season's A New Hope, kind of, if you will. If you're up on your Star Wars titles, you'll know what that means, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I think it was pretty satisfying. I think I liked where it ended. It seems dark and serious, and then also tying into the overall greater narrative that I think all the best Star Wars properties try to tie into a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. What do you guys think? We'll start off with Chris, because I think I've talked to Justin about it. I know a little bit more of what he thinks. But Chris, what do you think about the Bad Batch season 2?
Yeah, I have not been a fan as much of the Bad Batch as you guys have. I do 100% agree that the second half of season 2 was a lot more fun, a lot more interesting than the first half, and even the first season, as I remember it. It's been a while since I watched that. I still don't think it necessarily lives up to like Star Wars Rebels, the other animated show, but
I think more beautiful animation than Star Wars Rebels because the budget's larger.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. Yeah, sure. But ultimately, I really enjoyed the second half, and I am looking forward to the third season to see where things wrap up, which is not a thing I would have said between season 1 and season 2. You know, like I didn't even realize Bad Batch was coming out, you know, for season 2. So I'm definitely in a better place than I was last year as far as Bad Batch goes. I do really enjoy it, you know, especially the second half. I would like, I like that it's tying in. I think that there's overall, like in the Star Wars shows that I'm watching now, this and like The Mandalorian, you know, they are tying in really well and kind of fixing the sequel trilogy.
That's what Star Wars ancillary material does. Yeah.
So I find that extremely interesting, even if I'm not always like engaged with it as a story. I'm engaged with it as like adaptation, if that makes sense. Sure. So it is fascinating to watch how they fix this or how they go about trying to fix it. So I do find that interesting. Justin, since you and Mike have already told me, tell me what you feel about Bad Batch season 2.
Sure. Chris, and Chris only. Mike, stop listening.
Okay.
I really liked it. I'm in this mode, you know, over the last year to get ready for things like Kenobi and more Mandalorian and eventually Ahsoka. I started catching up on all the you know, extra Star Wars that's not like the main movies over the past year, and watched Clone Wars and Rebels, and so it's really just put me in this mode of loving all things Star Wars, and I find it really, really, really hard to not and just almost purely enjoy everything that I'm watching. So like
No, that's where I've been for a couple of years. I think you're absolutely right. Like when you invest that much time into like 7 seasons of the Clone Wars now, and the animated shows, and those are a lot of episodes. You find yourself being unable to tell whenever Star Wars is like not satisfying to the average viewer.
Yeah.
Because like you just are looking for more stuff.
Yeah. Even when something's not great or doesn't feel as good as something else, like at this point, for folks that have watched everything and you know, maybe read some books and whatnot that are canon as well, like it's such a drop in the bucket.
Right.
Most things that like it's not going to sway the overall ship, you know?
Yeah.
And so I guess I understand, you know, the first part of Bad Batch season 2 was a little bit more episodic, that sort of mission of the week sort of thing. I was enjoying it to the fullest extent. Like I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, but I loved basically from like that episode with the tsunami.
Yeah.
On for the rest of the season, it really starts to like spearhead where it's going narratively and start to bring everything back together and tie in little bits and pieces from earlier in the season, all together to like a really satisfying conclusion. I don't know that I'd be satisfied if this was all the Bad Batch we got, but it felt like a really, I don't know, it felt really satisfying to me. Like what more so than like the first season ending or whatever. Like, I guess I'm surprised. I think, and maybe it's because I've watched so much Star Wars since I watched the first season of Bad Batch, but like emotionally, I was just like, I was so moved and like, and sad and everything that I don't know. I was just really, really, really hyped on it, and kind of feeling bittersweet that season 3 is going to be the last one. Like, you know what I mean? It's that I'm happy that they're going to have a defined, tight
They're going
story
out on their terms. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm sad because I was really loving all of these characters.
Well, I would not be surprised if these characters show up again in some other form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably so.
I mean, well, that's the thing is like they could make another series that goes concurrent to Rebels, or I think what is only a matter of time is that they're going to make a series, like an animated series after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Like probably concurrent with The Mandalorian. So you could have some legacy characters in there, you know, that you would be hard to do in live action because it's expensive and requires a lot of special effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that it's kind of a bummer that it's ending at season 3, but also the whole series I think maybe feels like a nice epilogue to the Clone Wars. And I think the key to really enjoying the Bad Batch as much as like I think you and I do is being pretty familiar with the Clone Wars and how they told stories within that show. Like the structure of it, the one-off episodes, you know.
Yeah, and I think my attachment to clones in general, like clones as a whole, feel like so much more to me, so much deeper, conceptually and personally. The clones that we get to know in Clone Wars and Rebels and Bad Batch, that like this isn't the same sort of batch of clones, obviously, but it kind of ties in with that.
Sure.
The whole theme of, you know,
I would
people
say
being manufactured.
Out of the animated shows, the best thing to come out, including Rebels, but I love the clones, the different characters that we get. Rex, isn't he one of them from the Clone Wars? I like Rex, and I don't know. I like those characters of the clones.
Yeah, I agree. And like getting to know them through the Clone Wars, like it really helps enhance your appreciation of the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what The Mandalorian and probably Ahsoka and the other shows are trying to do for the sequel trilogy, which is good. That's the way it should be, you know? But I think one thing that the Bad Batch actually like kind of pointed out, which is that this idea that the clones under the leadership of the Jedi started to display what the Empire considers like a disturbing amount of independence and individuality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that line in this most recent season of the Bad Batch kind of really sums up the Clone Wars like as a whole, right? Which is like this idea that the reason we like the clones is because they weren't brought up under this militaristic government. They were brought up under the leadership of basically religious monks who actually genuinely liked them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And all that's missing from the movies. But if you like, you know, the movies and you want to like them more, I think Clone Wars and Bad Batch will for sure do that for you.
Yeah. And a sort of side effect of all of this is that anytime I've watched or see any of like the prequels or even just Clone Wars, Rebels, whatever, where like clones are fighting, or it even kind of translates to stormtroopers as well. But like when I see what before were just kind of fodder, like army people getting killed in like battles and stuff, like every one of them kind of hits home now. Like when people are being killed in like Star Wars fight scenes, there's no longer like I was playing the Jedi Fallen Order game, and that one is stormtroopers, right? Yeah, Stormtroopers not, but even them,
It
like
takes
every
5 years after Revenge of the Sith.
Gotcha. Yeah, so those are, even though those are Stormtroopers, not clone troopers, like I still felt bad every time I hack one down with like a lightsaber in a battle, even though I have to like progress the game.
Yeah. Well, actually, the sidebar, real quick, and this has nothing to do with any of the shows we're talking about, but the writer for Star Wars Battlefront 2, like who wrote the single player campaign, actually harped on Jedi Fallen Order video game because he's like, it's hard to feel like a Jedi whenever you're having to kill people that are begging for their lives, like some of the stormtroopers do.
Oh yeah.
And I think like, he may have a point there.
Yeah. And animals that are just kind of like, who are you? Like, you're around my children. I'm going to fight you.
Right. Yeah. That's in The Mandalorian a lot too, though, speaking of Star Wars. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about The Bad Batch other than it seems like we're all looking forward to season 3?
Yep. No. I think we've just about covered it. I could talk about it all day, so we got to kind of have to put it into somewhere. It. Yeah. So that's it.
All right, so here we go. Starting now, our Casually Criterion review for Taste of Cherry, Spy number 45.
All right, so as always with our Criterion films, they are typically films that have been out for a while, so we will not be doing our usual spoiler-free section up front like we do for our newer films, so we're going to jump straight into talking about the movie, maybe straight into spoilers, so consider this your spoiler alert, your warning. If you have not seen Taste of Cherry, pause the podcast now, go watch the film, come back, finish listening.
That's right. So, Taste of Cherry was directed by Abbas Kiarostami.
Kiarostami,
okay. It stars Humayun Ershadi.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. The IMDb synopsis says, an Iranian man drives his car in search of someone who will quietly bury him under a cherry tree after he commits suicide.
Apt.
Yeah. More than I knew about this movie when I started it.
Yeah, same.
In fact, I had no idea until he basically spelled it out for someone, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long time before they hit that point, too, because I spent quite a bit of time wondering where the heck things were going.
Yeah.
It's like 20 minutes in or so, yeah.
Yeah, what he was doing at the beginning of the movie, like driving around picking up people.
Yeah,
like,
in fact, I was so lost in the dark that I just kept trying to admire the shots and the composition of them. And like the technicality, because like a lot of the shots are him like looking through like a driver's side window with him in the foreground,
Yeah, well, that's a lot of this movie.
That's a lot of this movie. So I was doing my best whenever I didn't know where we were going to just admire the technical craft of because all the shots look good. They have all the blocking in them that they need, and a lot of that requires the main actor to be very good at driving and stopping at the right place.
Well, I was kind of questioning that in the beginning because some of these interactions felt so natural that I wondered if they were just kind of driving around.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that was one of my things to take away from it. Now, the main lead, like I believe that he's probably an actor, but then the
Yes.
people he picks up as we go along, they felt so natural, or there was something a little bit different that felt more like they had not been taught how to act. There was no like formal education going on.
I think the main actor this was his first movie.
Yeah, and even with him, but he's really good in it as well. But I think there's 3 people that he picks up as he goes along. All 3 of them are also really good, but in a more like unrefined way, if that makes sense.
A lot of non-actors, like I wouldn't be surprised if they were, genuinely like a religious guy, a soldier, and so the other guy was a taxidermist. I wouldn't be surprised. And obviously those people are there performing a role. But I like some of the people that he's encountering, like there's the kids in the car that are just kind of staring at camera, some of the people that come up in the first like 10 minutes when he's driving around before he ever gets anybody into his car. Some of that seemed like maybe they just had a camera and went.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a sense like, do you remember when we reviewed, what was it? Stray Dog, the Kurosawa film on this podcast. And we talked about how there's certain sequences of the movie where it honestly feels like we are just looking at a snapshot, like video of Japan in the 1940s or 50s,
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of historical, like, whoa, this is a really clear, crisp, genuine image of what life was like in that point in time. Something that I would never have seen had I not watched this movie, right? There's a little bit of that about 1990s Iran here.
Sure.
Like there's the countryside and the workers, a lot of whom I'm sure agreed to be in the movie and it was staged. But a lot of this feels very much like we are seeing a snapshot in time of something that may not even look like that anymore, or it may look the exact same.
There's so much construction going on while he films. I'm sure the construction is not part of the movie, but I imagine it's different now. But because I feel like they were building roads, and he just happened to be there to film, type of thing.
Sure.
That's how it feels to me.
Well, it has that in common with a lot of the like Italian neo-realist films, like the post-war Italy sort of stuff that, like Bicycle Thieves or Rome Open City, where they're shooting on location in like the rubble. So it does feel like a time capsule if you want to see what it looked like.
Yeah, that's also one of the things that I really like about the film is the landscapes. Like the car. Most of the time we're in the car, right? But every once in a while we'll leave the car and we'll just kind of watch the car as it winds on these roads, and and I really enjoy those shots as the car will disappear behind a hill for a while, and as like this really, it's about this guy trying to convince people to bury him after he commits suicide. So it's obviously a very philosophical film, but like that kind of just fits in there because you're just like in that mood of like watching these things happen, and it kind of fits the whole movie perfectly, I think.
Like if I can tell a funny story from film school, and I kind of tell this because I think it's funny that so our last Criterion film was the Jenny Dillman. And
sure, yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember, but I talked about how I made a film where I did like a lot of really similar things.
Yeah.
A short film. Well, I made a film, and Mike, I know you remember this one, where like 2 people are in a car talking for like 15 minutes of this 16-minute short film.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, this is like the second Criterion film in a row where I see that like someone did what I did, like way, way, way before me, and did it better, obviously. But I remember when I showed the film in class for the first time, and somebody afterwards says like, man, you got to give me more than just the 2 shots of the people in the car. Like I cut to an exterior of the car, like get me out of the car. Like you got to have another shot there. And for a long time I was watching this movie thinking that guy was wrong. He's not cutting out of this car. We're in here the whole time.
Yeah.
And then we cut to outside shots of the car, and I was like, okay, well, maybe you need those outside shots. I don't know.
Fair enough.
But
and I don't know
funny.
this, but I would argue that there's probably at least 15 minutes of conversations entirely in the car.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, each conversation, at least.
Yeah, so I would say that those outside shots may be necessary, but if he made a 15-minute short film, I bet there'd be less of those in there.
Yeah,
sure.
That's true. I had 0 in mine.
That's true.
But anyways, it was just really, really funny coincidence that these two are so similar to things that I made, I thought.
Possibly the two slowest films that we've watched. I
was doing a lot of that crap on purpose in film school because I thought I was edgy.
Yeah. Or you're at least trying to maybe be edgy.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
anyways.
Yeah, here's the thing. Full disclosure, I do not have the Criterion channel, and I do not own this on DVD or Blu-ray, so I watched this on HBO Max.
Yeah, same.
And so, on that particular transfer, you can see like artifacts on the profile of his face when the car moves and the camera's pointed out the window.
Yep.
You can kind of see like artifacting on like the tip of his nose and like on his mouth and stuff like that, just like on his profile, right?
Yes.
Is that a transfer issue, or was this whole thing filmed on a very early like digital camera, like a VHS of like an early VHS or I guess it would have been late VHS, but early digital? Or was this a film transfer that doesn't have a particularly good transfer on HBO Max?
So, explain artifacting, because I did watch it on the Criterion channel.
A little bit of distortion. Like whenever he's driving, like if you look at like the very front of his face, you can see like blurring.
Yeah, like pixels and like weird.
Yeah, like pixels. Like it's pixelating
between his nose.
Yeah. I am not as good as spotting those things. Like I haven't edited as much as you guys have. So you guys, I think, are much better at spotting those things. But I will say I didn't notice them on the Criterion channel. So I don't know. I guess I can't really speak to it, but I felt fine. I didn't have any problems with it.
Yeah. So there was no point during this where you looked at this and felt like maybe it felt like digital or like, cassette tape or like some kind of high quality tape.
Yeah.
Well, getting to the end, I guess. I mean, that part.
Well, yeah, the last one. There's a epilogue. I think that.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm pulling it up because since I watched this on HBO Max, I have access to Criterion Channel now. So I'm pulling it up on my phone. The transfer that is here on Criterion Channel is significantly better looking than the HBO Max one.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I do not see those artifacts because I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's what I thought too. I was like, okay, this is made in the 90s, 97. So like it's very, very possible that this was intentionally done on digital.
Right.
And it also makes sense too because this was, somewhat of a controversial film to my understanding to be made in Iran at the time about suicide because it is forbidden in Islam, right?
It's forbidden in most religions, I think, but yeah.
Sure, but
yes, it's probably more extreme to talk about it in Iran.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I've kind of consistently read about this movie is that, it was really edgy and rebellious for like tackling that because I don't think the Iranian government was very thrilled.
Yeah, there's definitely more. From my understanding, Kiarostami, he kind of had to skirt around like censorship kind of issues type stuff.
Yeah. And so the digital made sense to me conceptually, but it does look like it was shot on film based on this transfer, and that's just a bad transfer on HBO Max. And then I think I read too that even that end section where we cut away to like the making of the movie sort of shots, I think that was shot on film but then transferred to but then like recaptured on digital to give it that look. I think I read that. So that's like an intentional, they made it look worse than it was shot for that effect.
I was actually looking at the IMDb trivia, and it says this is one of the favorite films of Agnes Varda.
It makes sense.
So that actually makes it okay that it beat out Cleo from 5 to 7 on our most recent poll.
It's all okay, and it makes it okay in your book. Do you like it more, the movie, now knowing what Agnes thinks?
No, I don't think that necessarily affects me, but I do agree with her. I think we kind of buried the lead because we just kind of jumped into it, but I do like this movie quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I watched this, full disclosure, probably 2 weeks ago, and we have just had to postpone recording for a couple of weeks just due to stuff coming up. But I've thought of this movie since then more than once, and it stuck with me. I admire the craftsmanship. I admire the acting and the naturalism of it. And like you were saying, it's sort of rebellious. It kind of feels that way. It feels like a little, I don't necessarily want to say I got rebelliousness out of it, but it feels like it's a film made with passion that had something to say.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So I really like the film, even if for a couple times during the running time, I did look at my phone. I tried not to, but I did. But I was able to get back into it. You know what I mean? There was never a time where I was out of it for like 10 minutes. There was just times where I was like, oh yeah, hang on. I got to rewind for a minute because they're talking about stuff that I don't want to forget, you know?
Yeah. I think there's rebelliousness in like the structure of the film in the sense that not a lot is spelled out for us, right? Like we have no, at least not that I recall, there's no indication of why he wants to kill himself. Like what has driven him to this point.
Sure.
It's
just almost like it doesn't even matter.
Mentioned. Yeah. I don't think it does. Or at least that's what Kiarostami is telling me by not including that, you know, because I've seen reviews, and famously Roger Ebert gave this movie 1 star.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, go read his review. It's interesting because like he's not necessarily wrong. I respect his opinions, and like he's not wrong. It's just I just don't necessarily agree like with his assessment entirely. But one of his complaints is that we might feel more for this character if we knew more about him and knew more background. So I think this film is rebellious by intentionally leaving a lot of that out. And I think that sharpens our focus on the act and people's reaction to it.
Yeah, I think it puts us more in the state of mind of the people he picks up.
Sure. We are the passenger. Of them,
they want answers as soon as they get once they get a picture of what he wants from them. Yeah. You know, each of them is approaching him from a different way, whether it's like condemning him outright for even thinking of it or whatever. Each of them is kind of like, well, why? You know, and it doesn't really matter to them ultimately.
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
but we're them, you know, in that instance. We want to know more that like they do.
Yeah. Completely agree. And we get different points of view of like, well, why not? Because, you know, a lot of them are saying, you know, obviously no. And then, so I don't know. It's interesting that way. I like it better. I also think there is a rebellious sense there in this movie, especially like when you think about the Iranian government and like when this was put out, but like him going around trying to pick up somebody to bury him, but we don't know why he's trying to pick these people up. He's just driving, looking at guys, and you think, oh, is he looking for a prostitute, you know, like a male prostitute? So that's even more rebellious because it's letting us think that in this Iranian movie where that would absolutely not be okay, you know, in that that government stricture. So it's kind of teasing that part out too, or as well. And I did find that interesting, that to me is rebellious.
Letting you wonder of what's happening that long without spelling. Because I think I would bet, and I don't have exact time, but I would bet it's a good 20 minutes into the movie before you figure out what he wants from these people.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's a long time to not know what's going on.
Yeah.
In a movie where not much is actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And I love all that. Like, it's kind of a good thing because I think I'm in the same boat as you guys. Is that we watched this a couple of weeks ago, planning to record, postpone. Here we are. It's kind of a good thing because that's really given me that time to like reflect on the movie, let it sink in, have its, I've forgotten what I've forgotten about it, and I've remembered what I've remembered, and so like those things are obviously like very important. And I've remembered a lot of this movie. I remember a lot of the like things that happened, even things that seemed superfluous or like irrelevant at the time have kind of stuck with me. And having had that time before we've talked about it, even if I'm like, I may be fuzzy on like very, very specific details of the conversations he has, like what things that were specifically said, I may not have as much of, but I have a lot more in my mind that I've thought about. And this to me is a film that I hate to say the same thing that we said about Jenny Dielman and sometimes say about these Criterion films. I think we said a lot about Solaris too, is like watching it can be a chore, but the thinking about it, the talking about it is where it really pays off. And this is another film in that vein where I think it's way more fun to like dwell on.
Yeah. The major plus about this film is that it's only an hour and a half as opposed to 3 hours of the other two. But yes, I didn't have the impatience watching this that I did with Gene Dillman, though. I think, and this was my actually, like, I'd watched this is my second time watching it, and I'd watched it about a year ago. And yeah, I enjoyed this quite a bit, both times, where I didn't feel. I love movies, but sometimes you watch a movie and you're like, oh man, this is kind of slow, or it kind of loses your attention a little bit, even as hard as you may be trying to watch it, pay attention. But this, I didn't necessarily feel this as much on this one.
Agreed. Yeah, totally.
Speaking of, do we want to get into the end? Because I kind of want to, because I watched the 2 times and I have like kind of a different take on, well, not take, but like, I experienced them differently on both times. So if you guys are ready, we can talk about it.
I think
sure. Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
Well, are we moving to the ending as like we've surpassed our discussion on the rest of the movie? Because I have one other thing I'd like to touch on before we
do it.
I didn't do it that way, but yeah, I'd like to hear what else you have to say.
Okay. Well, just in case, I don't want to forget. I'd find it interesting that the scene where he almost drives off the road and then all the people come over to help him.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, but maybe obvious sort of like inverse to what he wants people to. He wants people to help bury him once he's dying or dead.
I mean, it could also be that on the road of life where we're all headed down, he wants to pull off to the side and quit. And there are people around him that could offer help.
That too. And I think, well, I guess I felt that there was a conflict, like a clashing of ideas, that he wants to kill himself and he's so set on it that he has money. He's got kind of a spiel and a plan prepared for all these people. Like all he kind of seems like the last piece of the puzzle he needs is just to find somebody willing to bury him. Everything else has been planned, thought out. But like in this moment where like I guess like why does it matter? Like he could have just driven off of the thing. Like it could have fallen off the road or something. And like, then he gets saved. And then I think at some other point in the movie, someone offers him eggs and he like turns them down because their eggs are bad for you. But like, why does he care? I found that to be like these little nuggets that were in there that just made me not necessarily think that like, oh, he doesn't want to actually kill himself and he's just crying for help. I don't necessarily think that's what it's trying to say, but just the complexity of,
well, sure. There's a
life.
He wants to be buried in accordance with, Islam law. I think I'm correct about that. So he's going to commit suicide, which is obviously against it, but he still wants to be buried in accordance with his religion dictates. So I find that interesting, you know, because it'd be a lot easier if he just killed himself, you know, like, and just after that, just forget about it. But he wants to have like a proper burial, which I do find interesting as well.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that if he kills himself, he kills himself. So like if Islam is being a religion, like spiritually, there's not a difference whether he gets, not as it gets buried or not, but it kind of seems like he wants to be buried. And it's almost like, well, if he's buried, nobody finds him because there's this construction site going on. And nobody knows that he killed himself, right? Like he's kind of getting... I don't think he necessarily thinks he's getting away with it, but do you follow me?
Well, it's almost like he expects to kind of have his cake and eat it too, even though he's like breaking the rules. He wants to give himself the peace of mind that maybe there's a chance he didn't he didn't do something completely terrible. It seems like to me, it's kind of what a lot of people do in every religion modern day, right? Like you look at a lot of modern day Christians and they don't live their lives like particularly good Christians, but if you tell them that they're not really a Christian, they'll get mad at you. You know what I mean?
Well, sure, they take certain laws. They justify...
People cherry pick what they want out of religious books all the time and ignore the stuff that they don't really care about.
Sure. Yeah. So like, he's like, well, suicide's okay because of X, X, and X, but I need to be buried according to law, because I don't want to just kill myself, and I want to make sure that I pertain to the law of his religion. So
right, like as someone who grew up Catholic, I know a lot of people who consider themselves staunch Catholics who are horrible people and don't even remotely try to not sin, right? But they still just ask forgiveness every now and then, and they call it a day, you know?
Yeah. Sure. I kind of see this as maybe trying to save himself from other people knowing that he killed himself. Like to other people, if he's never found, they just don't know what happened. So like, sure. To me, a lot, I mean, I don't necessarily want to get too deep into like harping on religion, but like a lot of, I mean, I could do that a lot, but harping or a lot of religion too is like, what do other people think of me? Do other people think I'm a good Christian?
Sure.
Right. Like, do other Christians think I'm a good Christian? Regardless of what other non-Christians may think of me, because I don't care what they think. But like,
it may be a combination of the two.
That feels like the purpose of this mission to me. Like that's what makes it make sense in my head to like find this random person. Yeah. Is so that nobody in his life is burdened or thinks that he went out and that he killed himself and is like, you know, committed maybe, so, you know, I don't know exactly the details of what it's like in Islam, but a great sin or something.
Sure. In my head, it's more of the other. And I also think he's a lonely guy and he doesn't have anybody else in his life. I mean, we obviously don't know much about him, but like seeing him in his apartment that little bit, I walk away thinking, oh, he lives on his own. You know, like he's basically on his own. I don't know why he's rich or has a lot of money to give out. I don't know if that he's rich necessarily, but like
maybe he just doesn't spend a lot of money on stuff.
Yeah, that could be. But I just kind of, that's how I walk away from it. There's not a lot of people in his life. He's decided this, but yeah, I think either interpretation is valid.
Well, okay. And before we get to the end, like Justin wanted to do, it seems like after he talks to the final person, it seems like maybe he sits around and ponders and meditates and maybe develops a little bit of an appreciation for life. Did you guys get that as well? Like maybe not necessarily like I don't want to do it anymore, but you know, like the old man said to him, you wake up one morning and you see the beauty that's there.
Mm-hmm.
You realize you'll never see, you know, flowers bloom again or children laugh or, you know, whatever, right? Like, do you get the feeling that his little walkabout by himself before the final act or during the final act? What do you make of that?
The film doesn't give us a lot of answers, so I don't know that I really felt like any sort of definitive way.
Yeah,
but I think there's a suggestion that it's possible. I think there's enough there, and much like the depriving us of like the knowledge of why he wants to do this, it's like we can fill in our own sort of story. We can fill in our own backstory for him, and I think we can project in that too.
Yeah, sure. This could be an uplifting movie or a really depressing movie, depending on your outlook.
Yeah, yeah. I think you can project a lot of your own stuff onto this character because a lot of that backstory is gone, and I think the same goes with like the ending and that you're talking about. It's like, how is he affected by these conversations?
Well, it does feel like it's about the storm, right? And you hear rain.
Yeah. I guess what I would say about that, like that chunk of him walking, is like, I always thought that he was never 100% sure, even when he's asking the people to bury him, because he's like setting out these rules, call out my name.
Yeah.
And if I answer, so he's not, that's what I walked away from that walk, was like, he's still deciding what he's going to do. And for me, like even that ending part, like, I'm not sure if he did it or not, you know?
For sure.
So, yeah.
Well, I think the rain, to me, like I don't know, thinking back on it now, like having been removed from the film, I don't know what happened. But as I was watching it the first time, it starts to rain at the end. And then it kind of cuts to black. And like I took that as sort of like what does rain always mean in this, right? Like rebirth, right? Like symbolic water. Rebirth.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took it as a new beginning because, like Chris said, he lays out, like, the person who finally agrees to do this, he tells them, like, multiple times, like, look, call my name, you may have to help me up, but if not, just bury me. And it's like, that doesn't sound like someone who's...
Oh, yeah. Doesn't he say, like, you know, maybe you might want to kick me or something too, just to make sure I'm not asleep.
Yeah, just make sure. Right.
I mean, I guess if I was going to commit suicide and I was doing it by taking pills, I'd also want to just verify, you know, like just check and make sure that I did it right or I took enough, and then we can go from there, you know, like just, I don't want to be buried alive, which also would make me rethink the whole like way I'm committing suicide, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think I agree that the point is that there is no 100% certainty here. There is doubt.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's important because, you know, I'm a guy who tends to gravitate towards darker endings in movies, but, you know, I also think there's something to be said for an ending that works equally well either way. And it really is what you bring to the table that defines how you, like, what you take away from it, right? Like, I always appreciate stories that can take the effort to end in that way, right? Where the movie doesn't seem like it has an agenda and it lets you decide. Like, there are certain movies that I've loved up until the end, and then I like them still, but like them a little less because the filmmaker had a point of view.
Right.
You know, I think the other day I cited Martin Scorsese's Silence.
Sure.
Like, I think that's a film that was absolutely phenomenal and great up until like the last 10 minutes, and then it dropped down to just pretty good.
Right.
And it's because his his outlook and his view on life doesn't necessarily match up with mine, and that's okay. But a film like this, I feel like, is this a happy ending, a sad ending? And the fact that it doesn't, it kind of lets me think back and do the work. I kind of appreciate that. It feels a little less definitive that way, right? It's always living in my brain.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what do we think about after that? Because the movie does continue after he's committed suicide, or I guess that you know how I feel about it now. although that was kind of a slip. But after that situation, the movie goes on, and it's interesting because the first time I watched it, I felt it was really connected to the film. And then this time, for some reason, it felt disjointed. It felt like it was kind of removed. It almost like the credits could be playing over it, and it's kind of just like behind the scenes.
It felt like the filmmaker realized he had a real bummer on his hands that his audience may not understand, or at least like his contemporaries or his peers or the people he would immediately show it to. And so there's almost like this epilogue of like, here's some shots of the making of the movie where we all had a good time.
See, nobody really killed themselves.
Yeah. Right, so you're saying that you don't think that that's an extra commentary that fits with the movie?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't at the time read it that way, but at the same time, the thought has crossed my mind since it ended.
Yeah.
But I didn't take a lot of meaning from the epilogue other than maybe a tone change at the end. But like I said, I have thought of it a couple times. So
Justin.
I'm not ruling it out either.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's interesting. I feel like I've seen similar things done so many times that like I question whether or not it felt a little pretentious for pretentious sake. But I don't necessarily know. I don't necessarily know what to make of it. I've seen some interpretations that it's his prediction of digital coming and film dying.
What? That's okay. Because it's shot on digital, it's got a digital aspect to it. I guess that.
Yeah,
I think it was shot on
film 1997.
Okay.
So, I think to go back to Star Wars, Phantom Menace was shot digitally, right?
Yeah.
No, Phantom Menace was shot on film. I believe the first digital was Attack of the Clones in 2002.
Okay, 2002. Yeah, and then
the first
28
digital,
days later,
like the all digital motion capture character, was Jar Jar Binks, though.
Gotcha. Okay.
What if this whole movie is just a metaphor for film and digital film? It's just like the guy, Batty, is that his name? Badi?
Yeah. He is film.
Yeah.
He is. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, Mike, but we watched the Uncle Boonmee, who can recall his past lives.
Yeah. I do remember. How could I forget Uncle Boonmee?
Yeah. And I remember sitting there thinking, what the heck is this movie? Like, and not
what
really
am I watching an hour into this?
Yeah. And then our roommate at the time was like, actually, it's about the death of cinema. I don't know if you guys know that. And I was like, what?
Yeah. And I was like, I didn't know that. Thank you.
I didn't pick up that at all. But maybe it is, and I might feel differently watching it with that in mind. Maybe this too, but it feels a bit like that situation to say that's what this is about. But the end tag, I saw that theory and I thought, well, that's interesting. That makes more sense than anything else I've come up with in my mind.
Sure. And if that's the case, what are we taking from that end tag? That cinema goes on, it lives on? Or is it dead and something atrocious has taken its place?
I mean, looking at digital at the time, it might have felt that atrocious.
Yeah, digital at the time was pretty bad. I've watched some pretty bad digitally shot films. I mean, the films aren't bad. It's just that the digital quality of it is horrible.
I would like to go back and watch 28 Days Later again, because that was shot on very early digital, like in 2003. So it must have been shot in 2002, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see how that holds up, because I remember that movie looked ugly at the time.
Yeah, Session 9 I've recently watched, and that was all digital shot. You can just tell it's an okay movie, but like the digital of it does not look good.
Yeah, wasn't some of Dancer in the Dark?
Yeah, that was
digital too.
Yeah,
that's an ugly movie, beautifully ugly because it's one of my favorites. But
it's supposed to be ugly too. Yeah,
yeah.
I think what I would say about the ending. And I don't know. I kind of read a little bit into like different takes on it, but I think the one that I fall on is like the ending is kind of saying we don't know who this guy is. We never will. We cannot through film. We cannot explore fully this gentleman. You know, like so. I don't know.
Especially if you don't show us that much.
Yeah.
If you literally don't tell us.
That the medium itself is incapable of, you know, no matter how much you tell, like exploring somebody fully. It's kind of like no matter how well you know somebody, their forest will always be or their mind will always be a dark forest to you, no matter how well you know somebody. So I think that's the same. I don't know. I do think that there is an element of pretension to it, but
I think that's probably true of a lot of the movies we review on this podcast.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily make it bad.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily. I've thought about that ending, you know, since last year. I'm like, what does it mean? You know, like it's obviously doing something to me.
Do you think about those clips or the everything preceding it more?
Well, I mean, I think that when I first watched it, that there's like that take, and it just felt more jarring. Like all of a sudden they're doing the I was expecting to see what happened to the guy or whatever if it kept going, or credits, and then it kept going, and it was the filming of it, and I was like, well, what does this mean? This time I felt like there could be credits going over it, like because it was behind the scenes and it was like outtakes, so it felt a lot more silly this time. But the first time I watched it felt more like he was trying to say something, like there's weight behind it. So.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the simplest reading of things like that is like portraying film as for film's sake, right? Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like, this is a movie. This is film.
It's breaking the fourth wall. It's a director breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah. So maybe that's too simple, though.
I don't know.
All right.
Part of the reason I like the movie so much.
Yeah. Do we have anything else?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm good.
Cool. And so I think we should wrap it up and move into our final section where we choose our next Criterion film. So thanks for listening to our review of Taste of Cherry.
That's right.
Okay.
And go ahead, sir.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
Okay. So for our polls, we pick a theme, and each of us picks a movie based on that theme, and then we put it out to the poll on the Twitter account, as we've said previously. So since this theme idea was Chris's, I'm going to toss it over to him. Explain this theme.
Yeah. So Beau is Afraid is coming out soon. It's directed by Ari Aster. And one of the things the Criterion Channel does is they'll interview different people. They like different people. Ari Aster's one of them. Bill Hader's one of them. Anyways, tons of people. And I thought it's probably pretty likely we're going to do Beau is Afraid. We haven't really talked about that. It seemed more likely 2 weeks ago when I came.
Just now.
Yeah, well, it seemed more likely 2 weeks ago when I came up with this idea. But I do think he's also got a lot of cool picks on here, which we haven't done on the show. So, and there's one in particular that I really want to watch, so I picked this one.
Yeah.
It's a list of films that he's picked.
Yeah, for clarity, the what's the series called? Adventures in Moviegoing?
Correct.
If you want to look that up. But yeah, it's his picks from that.
And it's on the Criterion Channel, so it's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. All right, so Chris, what's your choice? Since you have one you're really excited about, I don't want to steal
I'm glad that you let me go first, because this Songs from the Second Floor by Roy Andersson. Man, this is a movie that I have been wanting to see for a long time. I think we may even watched a documentary that had like footage from this movie in it. I don't know, but this movie looks surreal and like really wacky, and I can't wait to watch it because it's going to win again, and it's going to extend my streak to 3. So, how about you, Justin?
Beautiful. Yeah, so I'm going to go with a film I've been wanting to see for a long time, and just never have. And it's also another about 90-minute one, so if this one wins, that'll be good in terms of runtime. But it's directed by Alan Rene, who is a director I really love. Last year at Bad, I think, is an incredible movie. So I've always wanted to see some more of his stuff. And this film is Hiroshima Mon Amour.
Yeah.
Nice.
I have no idea what it's about, so I can't give you any more detail. I don't want to know till I watch it.
I've seen it, and I won't tell you. Don't worry.
Yeah, don't tell me.
I won't.
With a title like that, I mean, it's a rad title, I've always thought.
It is a rad title. That's why I blind bought it 10 years ago and watched it at once.
Well done.
Yeah.
So that's my choice. Mike?
Ruby. So I will choose another film, since that was going to be possibly mine. I wasn't sure. The other film is a film that I have also seen once before, and I thought about not choosing it for that reason, but I've always wanted to watch this film again because it left me thinking the first time I saw it. And that is a film called Sancho the Bailiff.
I'm really glad you picked this one.
Yeah, that's the other one I really, really wanted to see from this list that I haven't before.
Yeah, and I have wanted to see again since the first I saw it. So, yeah, there you have it. We have, what were the films again, Chris?
So I picked Songs from the Second Floor. Justin picked Hiroshima Mon Amour, and you yourself picked Sancho the Bailiff. I love Mizoguchi. I haven't seen Sancho the Bailiff, but I've seen other Mizoguchi films that I really like. So
yeah, Ugetsu's really good.
Yeah,
this one I dig. I think that's the only one of his I've seen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, go vote on our Twitter. Again, that's at Casual Cinecast. And I think with that, we're done with this episode, right?
I believe we are. I know I am.
All right, then. Well, let's not make you stay here any longer. Thank you, listener, so much for listening. Thanks, as always, to Jake Wagner-Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bobscotch.
All right. Stay tuned to this channel, this feed. Our next episode will be... is it Beau is Afraid? Is that opening this week? What's happening this week?
Beau is Afraid does open this weekend. It is a long movie, so we probably will have to have a discussion as to whether we actually
have
an opportunity to go see it. Yeah,
I don't mind 3 hours when I go to the theaters because it really helps, like, the time not seem so... I don't know. Like, there's nothing else to, like, distract you and make you kind of aware.
You're not at home looking at your, like, fighting the urge to look at your phone or eat food or something.
Yeah, I'm also super excited to see this movie. So
well, I'm excited to see something like what appears to be completely different from Ari Aster. Yeah. Like, not that Midsommar and Hereditary are super similar, but they're not dissimilar either.
They both have like that horror vibe to it that is also like elevated or whatever. I know people hate that, but like that trauma horror element.
Trauma, impending doom.
Yeah.
Sort of.
But yes.
But yeah. I'm sure this might have impending doom. I don't know. I've intentionally not watched a trailer for this film, so I'm going to go straight in.
It's got some banger trailers, though, in my opinion. It's got Supertramp in them, the band. If you don't know what Supertramp is.
I thought it was a person.
It's got that song from Magnolia, where William H. Macy's like in the bar.
Oh, yeah. Goodbye, Stranger?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Okay. I thought it was going to be a very large Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, nope. All right, anyways, are we done?
Yes. On that, we can't possibly do any better than that. You guys have a great day. If you find us on the side of the road, please bury us. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.